Right now, Reform UK is absolutely dominant in the polls. They're at least 10 points ahead of Labour, and have been for the last few months, to the point that the conventional wisdom seems to be that they're the ones to beat in the next general election. The media and Reform themselves like to suggest that Reform are doing well with younger voters, and that their support is one of the drivers of their success. So in this video, we're going to have a look into Reform's polling among younger people in the UK, how this compares to the support that young people have for other right-wing populist parties across the continent, and some reasons why this support differs. If you want more UK political drama from us, then check out our podcast Starmageddon, where we track the successes and failures of this new Labour government. Find it over on the TLDR Podcast YouTube channel or in your favourite podcast app. Now let's start by having a look at Reform's polling more generally. All polls so far in October have shown that Reform is ahead by between 7 and 15 points, with pollsters putting Reform somewhere between 27% and 35%. Behind them is Labour, polling at between 19% and 22%. So, clearly, among the pollsters, Reform is doing well and looks to be on track to form the next government. But where is this support coming from? Well, Farage is keen to suggest that this support comes from the younger generation. At a speech earlier in the year, the Reform leader had this to say about the younger generation.
We've got young professionals, but increasingly, we're seeing younger voters coming towards us. It could be maybe something to do with TikTok.
Clearly, Farage thinks that they're at least partly responsible for his rise in the polls. The right-wing press also seems to think that this is the case, with the Telegraph publishing articles entitled "How the Young Are Turning to Reform," "Britain's White Working-Class Young Men Are Flocking to Reform," and "Britain's Young People Aren't Immune to a Right-Wing Swing." But is this actually the case? Well, the latest YouGov poll shows that 13% of the 18 to 24 age group say that they support Reform UK. Similarly, the latest More in Common poll puts this support at 12%. While some other pollsters suggest this support is slightly higher, this is generally because their lowest age bracket is wider and includes voters in their late 20s and early 30s. Opinium polling, for instance, suggests that 26% of 18 to 34-year-olds say that they would vote Reform. More generally, though, support for Reform seems to go up with age, and the core of their support seems to be the over 50s and pensioners. YouGov puts Reform support among those aged 65 plus at 31%, Opinium puts it at 41%, and Find Out Now puts Reform support among the 65 to 74 age bracket at 51%. Nor does there seem to be much chance of younger voters migrating to Reform anytime soon. When YouGov asked respondents how likely they were to vote for Reform on a scale of 0 to 10, a whopping 61% of 18 to 30-year-olds gave Reform a score of 0, indicating that they would never consider voting Reform. Comparatively, only 25% of the 18 to 30 age bracket gave Labour a score of 0, and 27% gave them a score of 7 or higher. All in all then, on top of not polling particularly well with the younger generation, Reform doesn't look like they're in a position to actually win them over in the near future. This makes Reform somewhat of an international outlier, given that right-wing populist parties across Europe appear to be polling particularly strongly with younger voters. Analysis by the FT from the end of May last year found that 36% of 18 to 24-year-olds in France, for instance, backed Marine Le Pen's National Rally, and 31% in the Netherlands supported Geert Wilders' Freedom Party. Similarly, in Germany, 22% of those aged 14 to 29 backed the Alternative for Germany, or AfD. More recently, last month, the Wall Street Journal demonstrated that Vox, a far-right party in Spain, is currently polling at around 28% among 18 to 24-year-olds. So, why are Reform not polling as well as their populist right-wing European counterparts among younger cohorts? Well, there seems to be two main reasons. First, young people in the UK just don't seem to be as sceptical of immigration as their international peers or older counterparts. And second, Reform's policy platform doesn't seem to be targeted at young voters. Let's go through these in turn. When it comes to immigration, there's a stark divide in opinion among the public and younger voters. Overall YouGov polling shows that 44% of respondents in the UK think that immigration has been mostly bad for the country, and only 19% think it's been mostly good. In other words, a plurality of the country think immigration has been bad for the country. For 18 to 24-year-olds, though, the opposite seems to be true. 32% say that immigration has been mostly good, and only 22% say it's been mostly bad. It should be no surprise then that Reform's immigration policy is cited as the joint biggest reservation with the party among 18 to 24-year-olds who are considering voting for Reform. Among other age brackets, a mere 2% cite this as a reason they wouldn't vote Reform. When we compare this to countries in Europe, though, we can see this makes the UK something of an outlier. Mathieu Gallard, the research director at Ipsos, has pointed out that, in France, there's a section of young people who are hostile to immigration and vote on these issues. It's this section of the population that Jordan Bardella, the 30-year-old president of National Rally, targets in his TikTok videos. Similarly, a youth study in Germany found that 41% of respondents, aged between 14 and 29, were concerned about the uptick in refugees entering their country. So, clearly, younger voters in the UK don't seem to share the scepticism that younger voters in Europe have about immigration. The second reason that Reform doesn't appear to be doing so well with this age group is their inability to win younger voters over on policy. Right-wing populist parties often blend a successful communication strategy, for example Bardella's use of TikTok, with policies that will benefit younger people. In France, for instance, the National Rally promised to eliminate income tax for under 30s. While Reform did have some policies aimed at younger people, for example promising in the run-up to last year's election to scrap stamp duty on properties worth under £750,000, this clearly wasn't enough to actually convince younger voters to support them. More generally, Reform are more classically right-wing on economic issues than many of their European counterparts, and there aren't that many young neoliberals left in the UK apparently. This may be why Reform's lack of policy is cited as the other joint biggest reservation with the party among 18 to 24-year-olds who are considering voting Reform. It may also be why only 7% of younger voters feel that Reform best represents them. All in all then, Reform appears to be underperforming in the polls with younger people, especially when compared to right-wing European populist parties. Given their stance on immigration and their lack of policies for younger people, they may find it difficult to improve their polling among this age demographic in the near future. Now, there's been plenty of news on Starmer's India trip lately. Right now, there are 103 sources currently reporting on it, with most of the coverage coming from the left. If we dive a bit deeper, we can see that the left is framing it as a launch pad for opportunities and a seize opportunities mission, while the right frames it as a trip aimed at flying the flag for British businesses. This type of analysis is why Ground News has been my favourite way to stay up to date with the news since 2023, so I want to thank them for sponsoring this video. It's no secret by this point just how much we're fans of Ground News. They've been long-time supporters of this channel and independent news media at large. Their app and website makes it easier to navigate the news. Ground News gathers thousands of articles worldwide in one place, so you can easily compare how different outlets cover the same story. Each story comes with a visual breakdown of political bias, factuality, and who owns these sources. And it's not just me. Ground News has even been recognised by the Nobel Peace Centre for its impact on media literacy. And speaking of bias, their brilliant blind spot feed allows you to fully expand your media bias and find stories that are being disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum or the other. It's important to know the full story, and Ground News ensures you always will. If you're curious and committed to understanding what's really going on in the world, like us, Ground News is the tool you've been looking for, and that's why we've partnered with them to give TLDR viewers 40% off their unlimited access Vantage plan. Subscribe to the link in the description, ground.news/TLDR, or scan the QR code on screen. By subscribing, you're also supporting an independent news platform that's working to make the media landscape more transparent and balanced.